This is the story of a woman so brave, so giving, so faithful that she allowed us to follow her on a journey, one that it's safe to say no one wants to make. Dementia is a scary, mysterious condition that has devastating effects on individuals, their families, their friends, and the community. Betty Smith decided to share her story with us so that we may more fully understand and support those who are experiencing the effects of dementia, and family and friends. To truly appreciate this story, first you need to get to know Betty. She is a wife, a mother, an educator, a pastor, and so much more.
I felt that God was calling me when I was 15, but there wasn't a woman around in a pulpit. In our tradition, I was married. I was a stay-at-home mom, but I was doing in-home teaching with handicapped kids, and I did that for several years.
There was never a time when I didn't see her as the ideal mom. She is the mom everyone else wanted to have to this day. I have grown friends who say, boy, I wish I had your mom.
She's just always been mom, and an amazing one. Always accepting, always forgiving, always loving, and never judging.
In Stamford, Connecticut, Betty met Judy Craig, one of the first woman bishops of the United Methodist Church. That encounter changed the course of Betty's life. Over the years, Betty and her family lived and worked in many places. Betty started taking classes to become a minister. Despite all the challenges, a divorce, being a single mom, Betty became a pastor and served countless churches over the years. Along the way, she met and married Bill. When it came time to retire, Bill and Betty began to search for a place that would meet their spiritual and physical needs. They decided on Clark Retirement Community in Grand Rapids. Then COVID hit, and the world changed. But in their small neighborhood, the apartments on their floor, the community flourished despite the pandemic. Bill had heart issues, but Betty also began to feel that something was just not right.
So there was a lot of cardiac workups and neurology workups, and really they were coming up blank and mostly saying, you know, you're really in the average range for someone of your age, which, you know, no one loves hearing that, but of your age. But what she felt a much more drastic and rapid decline in terms of her cognitive abilities, and really, I think when it hit her was she's world famous for her chocolate chip cookies, which she's made from memory her whole life.
I've made them since I was about 8, and I have not used a recipe. So I got everything out, and I put it on the cupboard, and all of a sudden, I just said this. I look down and I go, flour? What do I need flour for Grandma's cookies? And I had to take piece by piece all of the pieces and put them back, because I didn't have a recipe to refer to, and I wasn't even sure if I could, excuse me, if I could do it. So the recipe went by the Wayfair for months. And then one day I thought, I wonder if I could try Grandma's cookies again. And I did. And oh my gosh, I mean, Grandma's cookies, you whip them up in 10 minutes, you know? And it was so arduous to, okay, now which part goes? It's Grandma's cookies, you know? And my kids were going, oh no, Mom. And, you know, it's like, no, our whole heritage is lost, you know. But it meant a lot to me that I couldn't do that. I mean, that to me was, you know, I can't do Grandma's cookies. I'm in trouble.
After many attempts, Betty did finally figure it out, and fortunately the recipe is written down so that it will never be lost. But there were other signs that were cause for concern.
Bill, Betty's husband, would go for walks, and he'd stop and talk with me, and we got to know each other pretty well. And then he said, "Hey, you're the expert on dementia. Would you mind meeting with my wife?" And I said, "Sure." And I said, "Would she like to have a cognitive test so we could see how she's doing?" And so I gave her a MOCA assessment to see how her cognition was. And so that's where it all started.
So I really can't remember what the next step was, but I remember at some point in time calling Chris and saying, this is just getting worse and not better. Or, I feel really weird and it doesn't feel like normal forgetting. And especially when people would say to me, "Oh yeah, I forget too." But if you wait long enough, it'll come back. That some things would come back, but there were whole chunks of things that just wouldn't come back. And I realized, and so that's when I began realizing bit by bit things that I shouldn't be doing.
I'm sure with Bill and Betty, when they look back, usually it's happening a year or two before they really identify it, or where they're just forgetting things or misplacing things or not knowing how to get somewhere. Those things sort of creep in, or they forget names or what was said. And so, when you love each other, you sort of accept that stuff, I guess. But over time, it gets concerning and upsetting to both people involved. We have different testing methods, but the most common tests that we use on independent residents and some of the other residents is called a MOCA, and it is a test that looks at memory, short-term memory, and executive functioning, identifying objects, spelling words that all begin with the letter A and how quickly people can do that, or repeating sentences, orientation to time, place, date. All those things are added up, and then we come up with a score. So it's real helpful sort of for a baseline to know where people are at if they're having any trouble.
Each time we visited Betty, she shared more stories. Things that came naturally suddenly were no longer doable. Everyday tasks became unfamiliar. Betty, once an avid reader, was finding it difficult to remember what she had just read. While many people try to hide their condition, that was not the case for Betty.
I like to encourage people to talk to their families, because when you have a dementia, you need all the support you can get. And if you don't have your families on board, that's a problem. And the other thing about that, most families have not been educated in dementia, and they need to get education. They need support. I encourage them to go to support groups.
Betty has always been the person that others turn to when in need. Throughout her life, she has always had a church. When she first came to Clark, she helped with chapel services, but she no longer trusts herself to do that. That has been hard, and increasingly, she hallucinates.
Almost every day when I wake up, there's a group of people in the living room. And then there's the musicians. Well, the musicians are evidently a new phenomenon that they are drawing out from just hallucinations, and they're setting them aside as a special group of hallucinations. And lately it's been like from 10 in the morning until it finally shuts off when I go to bed at night. And it feels like these guys, and they're all guys, get in their head when I might be susceptible to a concert by the chanters.
Well, we both know it's not real, and we laugh about it. and sometimes we cry about it. We just, what else can you do? It's life. And I think the more that we talk about it, the easier it is for us.
So Betty has a dementia called Lewy Body Dementia. It has, what it means is there's Lewy body deposits in her brain. And it's different than Alzheimer's in that, particularly in her case, she has a lot of hallucinations. People with Alzheimer's have hallucinations, but people with Lewy body, as the disease progresses, they may have more, and they may be more frightening.
Bill and Betty have formed close relationships with their neighbors, who have been an amazing source of support. That brings joy to them, and of course, they love to have a party or two.
Bill loves to make homemade ice cream, and more than that, our neighbors love him to make ice cream, and so he does it a lot. And so at the end, I help him out getting the almost done ice cream into the container to put in the freezer. And so I did all that, and we cleaned up. And about 2.5 hours later, I went to the refrigerator. I guess we were going to prepare a meal or something. And I opened the refrigerator door, and there sitting on the refrigerator shelf was the ice cream that was supposed to be in the freezer, and instead of hardening, it was softening. And you go, oh, call Bill, look what I did. Well, I'm getting used to the fact that those silly things are a part of the disease. And so I tend to say, this disease, what has it done now? Because sometimes what it's done, you don't know what direction it might take. And I feel like I spend a lot of time looking for things, trying to put things into words, trying to make known an opinion or something. It's exhausting.
The disease slowly and methodically takes its toll on the individual, but the impact on families and caregivers is also significant.
Well, Chris has got a support group, and I'm in that. And that's a real good support group, and all their spouses are up on the 3rd floor, and I'm still living with mine. So I feel pretty fortunate.
It's hard for me to get how it's been for him, because he is a man of long suffering. And we do talk a lot. We talk a lot. We talk a lot, we pray a lot, we cry a lot. I do think that in the end, I'm grateful, for every day. But I also have the attitude that if this day is all I have, that's fine. Life has been amazing, just amazing. And I've had, I've got kids, I've got this great relationship, I couldn't ask for any more.
When we first started to follow Betty's journey, she told us that she wanted to share her story because it was an opportunity to help raise awareness and reduce the stigma associated with dementia. We decided to visit Betty one more time. She's still having good days and bad days. Her voice is softer and less powerful, but it's her words that matter. She is advocating for all those who are walking with her and behind her on this journey.
Why haven't we found some help? Why can't we find the key, But I decided that I couldn't I couldn't change where we are, but I might change how we get there if you start with people's attitudes.
It's a disease that you need to talk about and call it a disease and try to be out there in the forefront, and maybe someday real quick they'll get a cure for it.
So I'm really thankful we've been able to do this video, this story, Betty's story, because so often we don't hear from people in the early stage, and which she's now progressed further along. But the story has to be told. We have to help people know what to do. We need to help them on that journey and give them ideas. We need families to be there for the person early on and not later. This is our world. There's a lot of people living with dementia, and we have to get the word out. We have to accept people. We have to care for them. We have to love them any way they are. And people with dementia are no different, but their story needs to be told.